Good morning, Namaskar. I'm indeed very happy to greet all the dignitaries on the dais, of the dais, ladies and gentlemen, participants to this conference organized by ET on Net Zero. I think since the last about 3 years now, almost 2.5 years, Net Zero has become kind of a buzzword. The number of conferences, seminars at various platforms, which I myself have attended, I'm not able to count them. That shows the kind of focus our country today has as far as the sustainability and the net zero requirement as committed by our Honorable Prime Minister on the international platforms is being realized by all. I'm going to talk to you about net zero sustainable energy transition strategy, and that would give you some idea of what we are facing today and who is responsible for the kind of scenarios which we are getting as far as the climate is concerned. A few things have been talked about by previous speakers, but the variability what we are observing today, I would say, are mainly due to the human activities. If you look at who is responsible for increasing the global temperature, it's very clear. There are human drivers, there are natural drivers, and there are what you are observing. If you see on those graphs, the human drivers and what we are observing are almost closely following, and the natural drivers are almost static to 0.0. That means it is a man-made problem. And who is responsible for that? Coal, oil and gas are by far the largest contributor to the global warming, and they account for almost about 75% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, nearly 90% of the all carbon dioxide emissions. All of us know human drivers are related to the power generation, manufacturing, agriculture, land use, transportation, and so on. Whereas naturally we are running over, today we have a lot of floods, we have a lot of cyclones, we have solar cycles. So solar cycles, yes, but many of them are again as a feedback driven by what we are doing on planet Earth. So who is responsible among the community, global community, who is responsible for this? If you look at what is the overall level of carbon dioxide today globally in the atmosphere, pre-industrial era it was about 280 ppm, and now we are about 419 ppm. That is the number. And who is largely responsible? Many times it has been said that developing countries like India are largely responsible, but the figures indicate something otherwise. Today, if you look at the G20 nations, 75% of the world emissions in 2020 are due to the G20 nations, and global emissions are about 6.8 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. They were there in the 2022. As far as India is concerned, our per capita greenhouse gas emission is 2.9 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is less than 45% of the world average. And our contribution to the cumulative carbon emissions between 1850 and 2021 is less than 4%. So I think this is a myth which goes around, and we have to correct it at various places. All of us know that we are part of the global sustainability development movement, and for energy the sustainable development goal is 7, which states that we have to ensure sustainable energy for humanity, nurturing the quality of life and all the aspects known to man. And there are major 3 pillars like energy access, energy efficiency, and clean and affordable energy for all. That is what is the overall perspective of the SDG 7. For SDG 7, we have to also understand that energy, actually following these 3 aspects, forms what is called the energy trilemma. And the 3 pillars of the energy trilemma, or the 3 corners, are energy security, one of them which is effective management of the primary energy supply from domestic and external sources, reliability, and energy infrastructure. The energy equity is about accessibility and affordability of energy supply across the population. And environmental sustainability means encompasses the achievement of supply and demand side energy efficiencies and the development of energy supply from renewable and low carbon sources. So this is what we are looking at. But for that, we should also see what is the kind of scenario which exists globally and in India. The graphs which are indicated here, the bars are actually giving you the percentage of the primary injection, primary energy consumption by source, and the blue curve indicates the kind of how much is the consumption in terms of terawatt hours. So globally, if you look at fossil fuel, is about 86% responsible for the primary energy consumption. Now renewable energy and the nuclear is only 14%. In the Indian context, the figures are fossil fuel is about 84% and renewable energy and the nuclear is about 16%. So we being mostly coal-based country, our coal is the highest, which is about 14.93, whereas in the case of global, it is the gas and oil which are the two major parameters, whereas we are on the lower side as far as oil and gas are concerned. What are the sectors which are responsible in terms of giving the greenhouse gas emissions? As on 2019, these figures are power sector, which is contributing almost about 1,332 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Then comes industry, then comes transport, then comes agriculture and others. And basically, the emission intensity to GDP was reduced by 33% in the 2019 over the 2005 level. As a relatively cleaner fuel, of course, natural gas can be an option for reducing these emissions. What is the kind of demand scenario which will be there tomorrow? The future energy demand in India in the year 2047 has been computed by NITI Aayog and many other think tanks in the country. I'm just giving you a summary of that. Already the demand has tripled over the last 3 decades and the share of traditional biomass is falling. We no more burn all that and coal and oil retain the dominant position. If you see the total energy, primary energy supply, which is about 9,647 terawatt hours in 2023, if we take the business as usual case, it will go up by 2.2 times and reach about 21,435. If you take the net zero case, then it will be 20,571, it will be about 2.1. This is the supply. As far as the demand is concerned, today we are about 69,978. It will go up by 2.4 times in the business as usual case and 2.1 times in the case of net zero. Now, what will be the share of which fuel? It can be seen that the coal, which is the primary energy source for India, initially now it is 49% and it will go down to 37%, and in the net zero case it will still remain about 29%. However, the methods of utilizing this coal or the fossil fuels will see a complete paradigm shift aiming towards increased efficiency and cleaner approaches abiding by the net zero commitments. We have a major problem of carbon dioxide emissions to be brought in such a manner that we abide by the scales set out for 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise scenario. If you see the global scenario 2050, the budgeting has been done that we have to reduce globally about 36 to 40 gigatons of CO2 per year. And the relative distribution of this responsibility for each sector is, for example, renewables about 25%, efficiency of energy about 25%, electrification about 20%, and so on. In the Indian case, this same scenario is indicated as about we have to reduce about 1.5 or 1.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year. Relatively, we are talking about demand, electrification, and efficiency as a major. Then comes, of course, green hydrogen and the carbon capture and utilization and things like that. So this is the kind of budgeting which is identified by various simulations that one has to do to come near the 1.5 degree scenario. Now, to accelerate net zero transition, it requires simultaneous implementation of the strategies by leveraging two sets of enablers. Number one is the coherent and stable policy framework, and number two is the investment and financing shifts which are essential. And the four strategies which are going to take these enablers into the real action are decarbonization of the power combined with extended electrification, decarbonization of activities that cannot be easily electrified, and acceleration in the pace of energy productivity improvement, optimization of the fossil fuel use within the overall carbon budget constraints. So that is what we have to do to get transition to low carbon energy systems, providing energy for all. We did again in the NITI Aayog simulation how technology can play a major role in containing the kind of carbon emissions. If you do business as usual, the blue curve in this, the top blue curve, if you see, you are reducing almost about 1.3% per annum and between 2010 to 2019. If you follow this, we are peaking around 3.4 gigatons of carbon dioxide per annum, and you will reach a figure of 11.8. That means you will accumulate about 207 gigatons of carbon dioxide. But you take line of sight scenario in which implementation of India's NDC existing and currently announced policies are followed. Technology advancement as per the current trajectory, as we are saying, some of them were highlighted by my previous speakers. Then the shift in demand to sustainable alternatives like selected areas, for example, EV, if all that is done, then you will get what is called a peaking that will take place in to a level of 3.8, and by about 2070, you will be in the region of something like 1 to 1.5 gigatons. But if you take the accelerated scenario and use some of the advanced technologies like adoption of new policies such as carbon pricing, technology breakthroughs like carbon capture utilization, and faster implementation in each sectors and levers, accelerated shift in terms of mobility, alternative materials, green steel, as Madam Neha was talking about, I think we can achieve this even in 2050 with the peaking as early as 2029 and so on. So this is the kind of a scenario, and one has to follow the technology pathways to arrive at least one of them, either the line of sight or the accelerated scenario. The NDC goals are known to you. The updated ones are 50% installed power capacity and of non-fossil by 2030, 45% reduction in the emission intensity by 2030 compared to the 2005 level, 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent through additional forestation and tree cover, and achieving net zero emissions by 2070. That is the objective of today's conference also. So we worked out the kind of scenarios which have been discussed, and now we know that no single pathway is going to lead us to net carbon zero. It has to be multiple pathways, and those multiple pathways, as somebody mentioned, energy efficiencies, clean energy, and of course decarbonization of the difficult sectors. So if that we have to done, first thing is look at industrial decarbonization. Then use clean coal technologies, use carbon capture, utilization and storage, use alternate fuels like methanol, ethanol, ammonia and so on. With the penetration of the renewable energy, which is one of the mainstay as far as the net zero is concerned, the nuclear power will become the major base load power provider. So nuclear power with small modular reactors will be also in the focus. Commercial energy storage systems have to be developed, again to provide stability to the grid. Natural gas and carbon hydrogen, they could be again low carbon hydrogen, they could be alternatives. Renewables of course will become the major thing, and mobility will have to be sustainable. So we have taken all these pathways as technology strategies for net zero transition. So now let us look at clean coal opportunities. The clean coal technology is like today we have got all our plants, supercritical plants or ultra supercritical plants, which are working at certain efficiencies close to 30-35%. If you go for advanced ultra supercritical plants using coal gasification and advanced combustion cycles, you will be able to get almost about 45 to 47% efficiency. There's an R&D focus required because some of these technologies and materials are required to be done. India already launched a program and developed advanced ultra supercritical all technologies under the government sponsored program, and today we are ready to launch it to a scale with the R&D focus on plant cost reduction, increasing in efficiency, and competitive CO2 capture solutions. The CCUS is another area which is going to help us in the difficult to abate sectors. Up to 63.86% of emissions are addressable through the CCUS process, and CCUS can be applied to power, cement, steel, chemicals, refineries, hydrogen production also, and so on. So it is suited for new and existing fossil fuel based power plant, decarbonization solution for hard to abate sectors, direct capture of carbon dioxide from the air, technology, manufacturing other chemicals like methanol and so on. Hydrogen has been considered as one of the alternate fuels, most clean fuel, and that's why India has launched this National Green Hydrogen Mission with an objective of global hub for hydrogen and an investment of almost about 19,700 crores, with a goal that we should produce green hydrogen 5 million metric tons by 2030, for which incentives have been provided. But all this is possible if we are able to achieve the ideal solution for green hydrogen for it to become affordable, for which the requirement is that about cost reduction of the electrolyzer has to be done by 80%. Efficiency of the electrolyzer has to be improved to more than 76%. And the power which is needed for electrolyzing should be at the rate of about 2 rupees per unit. Then we will be able to achieve the goals what we have set up for as far as hydrogen is concerned. But I don't know how many of you have actually taken into account if India has to produce 5 million metric tons by 2030 of hydrogen, what are the resources needed for that? To produce this kind of a green hydrogen by 2030, we need power equivalent to the PV power equivalent to about 211.4 gigawatts. We also need that this could be all installed capacity will be utilized for production of hydrogen. In addition to need that, we need land, which will be in the region of about 140,000 hectares to about 191,000 hectares for RES installation. Then we need water, which will be in the region of 160 billion liters of water per year. So this is the kind of stress we are going to have as far as this objective is concerned. So one has to look at it very carefully and plan the strategies accordingly. Now, what is the other strategy we have in addition to the green hydrogen is to follow the blue hydrogen approach. The blue hydrogen is nothing but whatever carbon dioxide is produced in the production of hydrogen, you please capture it and use it for making chemicals or sequestration. For that, you will be able to achieve a cost of about 1 to 1.2 rupees per kg, whereas the green hydrogen today is, sorry, 1 to 1 dollars per kg, whereas the green hydrogen today is about 5 to 6 dollars per kg. What are the various carriers there? Hydrogen production via electrolysis for Indian power grid, if you use Indian power grid which is not decarbonized, is about 30 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions per kg of hydrogen. In comparison, the blue hydrogen is produced from natural gas and it is going to emit only about 1.7 kg of carbon dioxide per kg of hydrogen. The production of green hydrogen will have a lower carbon footprint than blue hydrogen only when the grid reaches 90% carbon-free power generation, which is a tall order. Thus, adopting blue hydrogen will eventually lay the path for green hydrogen with incremental greening of the source selectivity. So, this was the point which was discussed even during the G20, and that's why in the G20 declaration, the word green was dropped and it was talked as clean hydrogen. We are talking of clean hydrogen today. Hydrogen which is producing minimum carbon dioxide emission. That's why MNRE has put a limit now. It should be 2 kgs per kg of hydrogen production. Methanol is a good carrier for hydrogen because it can be stored, highest hydrogen to carbon ratio, immediate solution for eruption of hydrogen. It has a low carbon intensity. It can be produced from MSW, agri-waste, captured carbon dioxide. Biomethanol from MSW can produce hydrogen at carbon intensity of 2.15 kg of CO2 per kg of hydrogen, leading to 90% greenhouse gas emissions compared to the grid-based electrolysis. Vehicles with onboard methanol reformer incur lower capex and opex for longer range, shorter refill time, and lower emissions. So hydrogen-based fuel systems using methanol economy should be a bridge that could be taken as one of the things. Now, we should also look at what is the scenario as far as the solar is concerned. All of us are talking about 500 gigawatts by such and such time. We are also talking of huge, but one has to look at 50% of the country's electricity needs should be met by the renewable by 2030. India's renewable energy installation are projected to grow at a rate of about 35 to 40 gigawatts annually through the fiscal year 29 to 30. For this, if you look at it, if you follow the current trend, then you will be able to reach 2030 by about 400 gigawatts at the rate of 35 to 40. But if you have to go to 500, you have to add about 45 to 46 gigawatt per year. But then there's a cost to each and everything. Investment to the tune of about $223 billion is required for achieving target for solar and wind. And that's why these curves indicate very clearly that between 6 and 13, it was $32 billion. In 14-21, it became 75, which was 2.3 times. And now we need to make it 3 times and reach about $223 billion if we want to achieve all the objectives. So that is the kind of commitment we have to make fiscally to reach the kind of renewable penetration what we are talking of. In addition to support this renewable, you need huge hydrogen installed capacity for the storage. Today, hydropower is about 51,794 megawatts. And if you do pump storage, water battery, it will be about, we need about 4,446, which is what is happening. India requires about 18.8 gigawatts of pumped hydropower capacity to support the integration of the wind and solar by 2032. So that's why there are major initiatives. Government has identified 100 gigawatts of pumped storage potential, including on river, with more for off river at over 60 identified sites. Mobility is another sector which is causing given problems. And if you look at clean mobility requires vehicles with direct EVs or flex fuel vehicles with IC engines, or fuels like advanced fuels like methanol, ethanol blends and so on. Batteries other than the lithium ion battery, sodium ion batteries, hydrogen fuel and fuel cells and so on. And other modes of transportation people have discussed about, like shared mobility, public transport and all that. Today's benchmarking figure is that it should be about 100 grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer. So if you look at the world of today, until 100 grams per kg is needed, a portfolio of IC engines, mild hybrids and less than 10% electrification is what is needed. If you see the countries, China, only the Europe has actually crossed that line of 100. Everybody else is still up. So world of the near future, below 100 grams, equal importance has to be given to IC engines and plug-in hybrids and EVs. If you really want to go to less than 100, that is about 50 grams, then scenario will consist of majority of things will be EVs, then plug-in hybrids and fuel cell vehicles. That would be the scenario as far as combinations are concerned. Energy storage roadmap, as I mentioned to you, you need almost about 2,416 gigawatt hours by about 2032, both for the storage, stationary storage and the electric vehicles, if we have to provide the kind of infrastructure for that. Nuclear is actually the answer, and nuclear will give you that with the conservation approach, installing a nuclear capacity of about 400 gigawatts equivalent will avoid cumulative about 30 gigatons of carbon dioxide. And if we take an ambitious approach, installing a nuclear capacity of about 1160 gigawatts will avoid cumulative about 70 gigatons of carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I don't know how many of you know that over the last 75 or 70, over the 5 decades, how much nuclear has contributed to the savings. 70 gigatons of carbon dioxide it has saved over the last 5 decades. And it continues to avoid more than 1 gigatons of carbon dioxide annually. This is the global figure. So hence, there is a need for us to look at SMRs, which are small modular reactors, which can be factory produced, and they don't need that much of land space. They are economic, they are modular, they are flexible operation, they are small footprint, and better affordability, shorter construction time, and they can actually provide the base load as far as the energy penetration is concerned with respect to the renewables. So renewables paired with a steady carbon-free source like nuclear energy and Indian nuclear energy, the small modular reactors, is the answer for that. Today, 98 identified SMR models world over are being developed, and 56 are under active development at present. This is the scenario globally. So India also has to make our own start in this region. The nuclear hydrogen, all of us, we've been focusing more on the electrolyzers run by the grid or solar power. But the answer lies in using nuclear power, and nuclear power can be used in 2 ways. One is nuclear power and then electrolysis. That could be low temperature or high temperature. Another one is the thermochemical or chemical cycles or hybrid cycles, in which directly you can split water into hydrogen and oxygen. That gives you a much cheaper and cleaner option for producing hydrogen. For producing this kind of scenario, you need a lot of materials. Nobody has thought about that. If we go for all this net carbon zero, do we have the materials in the country and globally also for meeting this? You can see how much of copper is needed, how much nickel is needed, how much chromium is needed, how much zinc is needed for wind, solar, nuclear, and so on. So automatically you can see the renewables need much larger material requirement compared to the nuclear, coal, and the natural gas. The R&D is another area which needs focus. We need R&D on batteries, supercapacitors, electricity distribution, energy conversion, fuel cells, hydrogen production, renewable energy, oil and gas. I won't go into details of them because they are basically all scientific subjects which requires our focus on doing R&D for improving the efficiency and getting them into higher efficiency mode at each and every sector. So what are the challenges in the transition pathways? Green hydrogen, almost 90% greening of the grid power is required. High cost of electrolyzers and import dependency has to be avoided. Unaffordable cost of green hydrogen till 2030, dependent on cost of power and electrolyzers, as I mentioned to you earlier. Carbon capture and utilization and storage, it is a techno-commercial barriers in realizing industrial scale of operations acceleration today. Investment with government support needs to be accelerated. Harmonization of codes and standards of safety and quality are required. And R&D for reduction of the cost from today's almost about $50 per ton of carbon dioxide to less than $25 per ton is required to make sure that it becomes affordable. Mobility, high import of storage batteries, this is our challenge today that needs to be solved. Low rate of penetration of clean electricity in the electrification strategy because the grids which are going to charge these batteries are still not decarbonized. SMR is the answer, but amendment is required to the Atomic Energy Act to provide more and more participation of the private sector for accelerating this particular sector and setting up factories for manufacturing SMRs in the country. Choice of nuclear fuel cycles based on indigenous capability like thorium has to be planned. To conclude, I would say that to promote low carbon energy transition, a judicious combination of following things are needed. Increase in contribution of renewable energy in electricity generation, use of CCUS in fossil biomass power plants, use of and even in the industrial power plant, industrial systems, use of hydrogen and methanol in the energy and transportation sectors, enable penetration of green hydrogen in steel, refinery and chemicals through affordable blue hydrogen. The pathway should be blue hydrogen. And utilization of nuclear power via SMRs. Success of strategies hinges heavily on the availability of finances. I mentioned to you already the numbers. Technology collaboration and developing inclusive carbon pricing and taxing policies, and other financial interventions that encourage the use of alternative resources and dissuade the use of fossil fuels. Thank you very much.